You guys, Erin here, back with another moon update for you. I'm going to be talking about the very intense new moon we have coming up here on Monday, November 13th. The new moon peaks at 1:27 a.m. Pacific time, and I'm using the word intense because this takes place in the sign of Scorpio. We've got the sun and the moon at 20 degrees Scorpio, and just 2 degrees away from them at 22 degrees Scorpio, we have Mars, which Mars is one of Scorpio's rulers and is definitely heating up the energy of this zodiac sign. Scorpio is definitely hands down the most intense sign of the zodiac. Okay, now as with any new moon, this is the beginning of a growth cycle. Okay, we have a new moon in Scorpio this November 13th. Approximately 6 months from now, we'll be having a full moon in the sign of Scorpio. So over that 6-month period, we all experience this opportunity for growth that's related to the sign of Scorpio. Now, what I've been doing every single new moon since June of 2016, pulling out my journal, writing down the growth that I want to experience that's related to that zodiac sign. We all experience this as a collective, but it's also very unique to each and every one of us, okay? And what we can do is we can pull out our natal charts to see where in our natal chart does the sign of Scorpio come through, okay? Which house in your natal chart does the sign of Scorpio rule? Personally, I like using the whole sign house system for these lunar transits. If you're using Placidus or Coke or Regiomontanus, any other house system, you're going to want to see exactly where 20 degrees Scorpio comes through your natal chart. I love those house systems as well, but it just kind of depends on what form of astrology I'm working with here. And this could be coming through your house of career, your house of relationships, your house of karma, your house of transformation, your house of communication, your house of health. There's all these different areas of your life that this could be coming through. And when we get familiar with our natal chart, we can see which area of our life is being activated by anything astrological. Not only that, but do you have anything in your natal chart near 20 degrees Scorpio, say between maybe 17 to 25 degrees Scorpio? Then this is activating that, whatever that is. If you've got Mercury, say near 20 degrees Scorpio, this is activating your own natal Mercury. Or maybe you've got something trining that near 20 degrees Cancer or near 20 degrees Pisces, or maybe opposing it at 20 degrees Taurus, or maybe squaring it at 20 degrees Leo or Aquarius. Okay, we can really see how this manifests for us as individuals when we get familiar with our natal chart. When you get a reading with me, I always offer you a free video recording so that you can always go back to that recording to review and see which area of your life is being activated by anything astrological. You can also take my courses through the Academy for Astrological Medicine, where I teach you how to read a natal chart. If you just go to the Academy for Astrologicalmedicine.com, I'll leave a link for that. You will see the 101 course. Okay, so there's that. If that's too much for you, that's perfectly okay. Just take a step back and focus on the sign of Scorpio in and of itself. So what I'm going to do in this recording is I'm going to break down this sign of Scorpio for you so you know what you're working with here. I'm also going to be pulling up the chart and showing you some other prominent astrological forces we are receiving at the time of this new moon. I'll also be talking about certain parts of the body that are ruled by the sign of Scorpio. Some of you already know which parts of the body the sign of Scorpio rules, so this should be an interesting recording. Okay, and also I'll be talking about certain parts of, well, these parts of our body become more sensitive when the moon transits through Scorpio. So I'll also be mentioning some particular herbal remedies to help support these parts of our body during this lunar transit. And I will also be talking about gemstones that really resonate well with this sign of Scorpio. After I make the journal entry, I like to take a couple of gemstones. I actually usually work on a trio. I usually use 3 gemstones and place them on top of my journal. Okay, you can always find an extensive list of gemstones that resonate well with the sign the moon is transiting through in the description below. And if you don't have any of these gemstones, please do not feel like you're deprived of gemstones. Just work with what you've got, okay? And if you want to manifest more gemstones into your life, this might be a good time to do it. Okay, so there's that. Now, first of all, this sign of Scorpio. Okay, why do I call it intense? First of all, it is ruled by Mars and Pluto. In traditional ancient astrology, it's ruled by Mars, and we can see, once we get familiar with the zodiac, we can see why Mars rules Scorpio through calculations, really. But that's, the traditional ruler. However, in modern astrology, it's ruled by Pluto. And really, both make sense to me. And I'll explain to you why. First of all, Pluto rules our spiritual willpower, as in our psyche. Pluto is deep and a very intense energy. Mars influences our physical drive, our physical willpower. So between this Mars and Plutonian rulership over this zodiac sign of Scorpio, that's in part why the sign of Scorpio is so incredibly intense. Can also be quite psychic with that Plutonian rulership, okay? But it's also what we call the fixed water sign. Now, when I say fixed, what I'm talking about here is an ability to do things with consistency, like pick up a rhythm and stick with it. However, that element of water is very strongly associated with emotions. All the water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, these are the signs that are directly associated with having to feel the emotions. Okay, the sign of Scorpio feels things deeply and intensely. Okay, now also the sign of Scorpio, the motto for the sign of Scorpio is generally I transform. I also have heard the motto I desire for the sign of Scorpio. Again, those both make sense to me. I think really traditionally it is I transform. The reason for that is this is the sign of transformation. Okay, this is the sign that's all about flushing things out, flushing out the toxicity, going through basically a death and rebirth process, putting the things to death that are no longer serving you so that you can make room for a more powerful new beginning. Again, a lot of that has to do with that Pluto and Mars rulership. It's the sign of transformation. But that I desire, I'll just give you this little hint right now, part of the parts of the body that the sign of Scorpio rules is the genitalia. Okay, this is a very desireful kind of energy. It doesn't necessarily only have to be applied to sexual energy, although the sign of Scorpio is very strongly associated with sexual energy. That has a lot to do with desire, but it doesn't necessarily just have to be the desire for sexual energy. It's just a very desireful and powerful energy. Okay, now it's most commonly represented by the scorpion. There are other archetypes that can come in and be associated with the sign of Scorpio, but it's the scorpion really does make sense to me. The sign of Scorpio can have a lethal pinch. Okay, now please do not get me wrong. I'm not suggesting by any means that just because somebody is a Scorpio, they're going to have a lethal pinch, but a lot of them do. And it's because they feel things so intensely, so deeply. This could also be very strong for people with moon in Scorpio, Scorpio rising, even Mercury in Scorpio, because it's this such an intense and condensed, intense energy. Okay. So with that said, how do you want to grow in these ways? What kind of new beginnings do you want to manifest into your life that have to do with this sign of Scorpio? Again, this energy can be very strongly associated with psychic capabilities. Mostly, I'd say, because I know a lot of people are going through a transformational process. How do you want that to play out? Write this down. I am, manifesting this transformational process with the end result of you fill in the blank. Okay. How do you want to transform yourself? And what do you desire? Maybe you just want to get more in touch with your deepest emotions, the most intense emotions with yourself, and work through those things. The sign of Scorpio, every single year when the sun transits through the sign of Scorpio, it's considered the time of year when the veil between worlds is thinnest. Okay. With that said, it's this energy that has to do with the unseen forces, has to do with even dark forces. In fact, the sign of Scorpio really does remind me of like going down into the underworld. Pluto is Hades in Greek mythology, the ruler of the underworld, having to go down and be exposed to the shadow side, be exposed to the dark, scary stuff. But so that we can rise above that, break through that, and again, kind of experience this very powerful rebirth. Okay, so how do you want to work with this energy? Again, writing this stuff down in your journal. I know not everybody is going to take the time to pull out their journal and write these things down, which is, in my opinion, a little unfortunate, because I wouldn't continue to be doing this for so long, writing this stuff down in my journal, if I didn't see such incredible results coming from it. Okay, so there's that. We'll leave that there for now. Let's pull up this chart and start going through some of these placements for this lunar transit. So first of all, if you're new to my recordings, what I work with is geocentric Western astrology. So with that said, what we're looking at here is basically a snapshot of what we call the tropical zodiac at the time of this new moon. And the way it works is, like, these are the planets of the celestial bodies. Like this right here is Uranus. This right here is Jupiter. This right here is Chiron. This right here is Neptune. This right here is Saturn. This right here is Pluto. This right here is Mercury. Down here, we see the moon and we see the sun. We also see Mars right there. And when we go in the wheel a little way, these are the symbols for the zodiac signs that all these things are going to be beaming through onto Earth at the time of this new moon. And I will mention this. This is based on my location. Okay, so with that said, everybody on Earth, we're all going to be experiencing the moon, which is where I'm moving my mouse, and the sun right here at 20 degrees Scorpio, to be very specific, and 44 minutes. However, if you are, say, over on the East Coast, and these guys, the sun and the moon and Mars, will probably be over here somewhere. If you're over on the UK or something like that, then the sun and the moon and Mars will be up here, but they're still all going to be at 20 degrees Scorpio. Now, going back to if you want to apply this into your own natal chart, if you want to see which area of your life is being activated by this transit, most prominently anyway, look to see, here's that symbol or the glyph for the sign of Scorpio. Pull up your natal chart and see which house, which one of these things that looks like a slice of pie, that sign of Scorpio rules. Again, if you're using Placidus, if you're using basically anything other than whole sign, you're going to need to see exactly where 20 degrees Scorpio comes through. Then understand the energy of that comes through that particular house, that particular slice of pie. Okay, so there's that. Now, let's start talking about the sun and moon conjunction. So anytime that we have a new moon, it means the sun and the moon are in the exact same spot. The way it works is the sun takes a whole year to go around the zodiac. The moon goes around the zodiac every single month. So obviously the moon's going faster. And so every single month, the moon catches up to the sun. Now, in Western astrology, the moon is really the mother, the sun is the father. And when they come together for a new moon, it's like they're the mother and the father are coming together, and they're creating this energetic baby. Okay, this that will grow over the next 6 months till we have that full moon in the sign of Scorpio. Okay, so first of all, the moon struggles in the sign of Scorpio. Don't get me wrong. If you got your moon in Scorpio, I love you, man, because I've got some really, really good friends who've got their moon in Scorpio, and I love the intensity that comes with it. The reason I say that is the moon, she rules our emotions. The moon, she rules our emotions and our intuition, our feelings, that sort of thing. And the sign of Scorpio, because it's so intense, it's like feeling those emotions so intensely. The moon is actually considered in her fall in the sign of Scorpio. Okay, so very, very intense emotions that come through here. But also, so this again, right here is the sun at 20 degrees Scorpio. So we've got this condensed intensity coming through. And what the first thing that my eyeballs see is Mars right here. Mars is only approximately 2 degrees away from the sun and the moon. Okay, when any two celestial bodies or celestial points in the zodiac are right next to each other like this, it's like they blend together and work as one. Okay, it's literally like holding a flashlight here and a flashlight here. The closer they are together, it kind of just becomes like one light. Well, Mars, as I mentioned, is one of Scorpio's rulers, so he's kind of a key player for this transit. But Mars, you may have heard Mars being referred to as the planet of war, because Mars is aggressive. Mars physiologically rules our muscles and our adrenal glands. Okay, Mars is very dominant energy. Okay, so and not that bit, because Mars is one of Scorpio's rulers, he works a little aggressively here. So this is kind of the blend of all these things coming through the intense sign of the Scorpion, all blended together, it's very, very intense and very powerful. Okay, so be mindful with your energy. Again, especially if you have anything in your chart near these things. If you've got something in your chart, let's just make a wide orb here. If you've got something between 15 degrees, even going down really to 13 degrees Scorpio. But if it's at 15 degrees Scorpio, that's still pretty strong. Okay. It means, let's say you've got your Mars at 15 degrees Scorpio. These guys are sitting on top of your Mars, making it even more intense and aggressive. Okay. Or going all the way up to even say potentially like 27 degrees Scorpio. Okay. That's a it depends on what planet or celestial body or even when I say celestial bodies, the sun and the moon are technically not planets. Okay. They are technically luminaries. But it could even be your midheaven, or it could even be your ascendant that is near this Scorpio energy. It's hitting all that stuff and making it very, very strong for you. But it could even be, if you've got something, again, trining that between, say, 15 and 26 degrees Cancer or Pisces, or again, squaring that near 15 to, say, I don't know, I'm going to go with 15 to 25 degrees Leo, or 15 to 25 degrees Aquarius. Then it's squaring those things. They're creating activity in your life. Okay, so it's very, very prominent. And honestly, even if you have nothing in the sign of Scorpio, we still all get this energy. We still all see it. It's just going to be more intense for some people than others. Okay. And not only that, but right off the bat, we see these dark red lines going right across the chart here. Okay. So this is making a very, what we call, strong opposition with Uranus up here, which Uranus is also debilitated. Uranus is in his fall in the sign of Taurus. Okay. Uranus actually works pretty well blended in with the sign of Scorpio. And the reason for that is, even though Uranus struggles in Taurus, let's start there. Okay, Uranus influences very abrupt and spasmodic changes. Basically, Uranus is like, I don't want to do this the old way of doing things. Uranus wants new, revolutionary ways of doing things. And again, the sign of Taurus is consistent, steady, grounded earth energy. It's the fixed earth sign. I'm doing this because Taurus energy does not like abrupt revolutionary changes. But that's what Uranus is trying to do in that sign of Taurus. Has been since 2018. I think this is going on for another 2.5, 3 years. Uranus going through Taurus. So that's kind of a rough transit in and of itself. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's definitely benefits to it. It's creating revolutionary changes to Earth. But not only that, but then this blend, this opposition we have to Scorpio. So going back to why this Uranus energy can actually work well when it's making a connection to that Scorpio energy, is because Scorpio wants the transformational process. But overall, this is just, especially again, if this is hitting something very prominent in your chart, it's very, very intense. This would be a good time for like going in, doing shadow work, like going deep into the stuff that people don't want to feel. This is a good time to really tap into that stuff and try and heal those things. Okay. So there's that. Now, on a lighter note, so we've got these trines, these blue lines that are going up here to Neptune, which is going through Pisces. So Neptune is Pisces ruler, one of Pisces rulers. Neptune influences this dreamy, diffusive, mystical, magical energy, especially when going through the sign of Pisces, because again, Neptune rules Pisces. So Pisces is also very mystical and diffusive and spiritual and that sort of thing. So I do feel like that's kind of, maybe, don't mean to overuse the word here, but diffusing some of the intensity, but it's also highly spiritual energy. Okay. It's almost like, again, going into even things like, not just shadow work, but doing things like meditation, doing things that are, kind of beyond the earth realm, things that are this sign of Scorpio, again, being associated with the other worlds. Neptune in Pisces is also associated with otherworldly energy. Neptune in Pisces breaks down our psychic boundaries, meaning enhancing our psychic capabilities. Okay, so doing anything that really supports that kind of work. Meditation. And again, as I mentioned last time, we had a little Scorpio energy going on. It's like, could be a good time. It might be a little too much, energy for this. But if you're somebody who likes to dive into things like occult studies or any kind of metaphysics, this could even be good for like psychological research, figuring out what's going on psychologically for people on a spiritual level. Okay, so that's very, very, very powerful energy. Not to mention that we just had, about 4 weeks ago, we had a solar eclipse. 2 weeks ago, we had a lunar eclipse, and we're still, that eclipse energy is still kind of lingering, which is all about big changes for eclipse energy. So a lot to be said about that. I know a lot of people are really going through something pretty intense, especially again, if this is hitting stuff in your chart, going through some kind of a process. For some of you, it's like something that's just going on right now. That's like, oh my God, it's just so intense. It's just so like pressed together and intense. For some of you, you're coming out of that. For some of you, you're breaking out of that. Like, oh my gosh, I just went and did all this shadow work. I just went through this whole kind of like psychosis, had to get in touch with my parts that I didn't even know were there. Some of you are finally coming out of that and rising above the painful stuff, rising above the shadowy energy. Okay. Now, I think with that said, well, let's take things on a much lighter note here. Let's talk about Venus over here. So Venus is going through the sign of Libra, which is lovely. She loves to be in the sign of Libra. And the reason for that is she rules the sign of Libra. Okay, Venus influences things like love, beauty, harmony, things that are aesthetically pleasing. Venus also has rulership over females in your life, except for mother. The moon is really associated with mother, but Venus can be really like show up as a sister or a new lady friend that came into your life. And this goes for, men or women, just a female that comes into your life. Venus can represent that. If you've got something near 5 degrees Libra in your chart, then you maybe have met a new lady, or this could be, all of a sudden you're just feeling a little more beautiful, or this could be very, very positive for some people's relationships. Okay, this could be good for artistic creations, anything like that. That's just overall lovely. Okay. And so and not only that, but Venus just recently broke out of Virgo. She was struggling in the sign of Virgo. And again, don't get me wrong. That doesn't mean if you're in your chart, you've got Venus and Virgo, it's a bad thing, but she can't really be herself in the sign of Virgo. Virgo is more about analytical stuff and kind of paying attention to the details and being of service. Libra is really the sign of relationships and harmony. Okay. So Venus it's almost like bringing a little bit of soothing energy to this intense energy that we're receiving from pretty much everything else. But also over here, we've got Mercury going through the sign of Sagittarius. Okay. So Mercury is basically the ruler of our mental function. We're constantly receiving information into our conscious awareness. It doesn't matter what you're doing, you be driving or reading a book or watching TV or whatever it is, receiving information. That's Mercury's job, to receive it. And what he does is he basically puts a little file on, or puts a label on the file and files the information away into our conscious awareness. And then when we want to communicate that information, when we want to tap in, as I watching last night, I want to tell this person about it. Mercury goes in and finds that file and brings it back out for us to express it, whether it be verbal communication or written communication. Okay. So Mercury is obviously a very important character and very busy character. And the sign of Sagittarius is what we call the mutable fire sign. By mutable, what I mean is it's very, very adaptable. Okay. And in the element of fire, it's like wildfire. Okay. So all of our mental function is kind of a little bit, it's almost this could take an effect on some people's nervous systems for sure. But again, it really just depends on your own natal chart. But what I really like about this is this sextile aspect, this green line that's going from here to here, approximately a 60-degree angle, very strong sextile. It's only about a 1-degree orb there. So that's Mercury in Sagittarius can almost be like overdrive, a very optimistic energy, However, but it can also be kind of like a almost spasmodic energy. The nervous system is all over the place. But this connection over to Venus, she kind of can soothe some of that. So I found that to be a lovely aspect going on for this transit. Also, over here, we've got Saturn in Pisces, 0 degrees Pisces, which Saturn just very recently went stationary and now is moving forward. Okay, that's a big deal. That's basically, okay, Saturn entered into Pisces in March of 2023, this year, and then moved all the way up to 7 degrees Pisces, and now has retrograded all the way back to 0 degrees Pisces. I can't tell you how many Pisces clients I've had, either Sun in Pisces, or even like as much as Mercury in Pisces, or Pisces rising people, or Saturn in Pisces in the early degrees of that Pisces energy, where Saturn went over that planet in your chart or their chart, and then had to retrograde back and now has to move forward again. And a lot of these people, especially the early degrees Pisces people, what I'm talking about is, let's say you're born somewhere around like February 19th, 2021, 22, the end of February, then Saturn went over your sun and can create these restrictions. That's Saturn's job. Saturn is rigid. Saturn is, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like astringent, like closes things up, creates discipline, responsibilities, restrictions, limitations. That's, again, Saturn's job. Now, as if you are, you got something near that, the 1st degrees of Pisces energy, Saturn's now going to be moving forward back over those things, and very well could be releasing some of that in the restrictive kind of energy. I'm thinking of a certain client who's had this court case thing that's just been going on, and it's like almost was ready to be taken care of, and then it was blocked, and she's her early degrees Pisces. So that's something I know is actually going on for quite a few people. Saturn's energy is very, very strong, and not only that, but he doesn't work so well in the sign of Pisces. What I do like about it is Saturn's bringing some structure to the sign of Pisces. As I mentioned, the sign of Pisces is dreamy and mystical and sort of flowy, and Saturn's kind of like, hey, back to earth here. Okay. But what I do like, the reason I was bringing Saturn up is because this, okay, here's Mercury, here's Saturn. This is really the only real like planetary square that's going on for this new moon. It's very interesting. There's usually more squares. This red line that goes from here to here, but and squares are generally referred to as like a challenging aspect. But I think this one is almost kind of good because, again, Mercury in Sagittarius can be like neurons connecting too fast. Things are going on too quick. And Saturn's kind of creating this, slow down, be practical with your thoughts, that sort of thing. Again, it's so important to keep in mind that all this stuff affects all of us very, very uniquely. But as a collective, this is the energy that we're receiving. Okay, so let's see, maybe we should move on to Pluto for now, because there's some squares coming off of Pluto, but that's to the nodes. Okay, so this right here is Pluto, which we've been talking about. Pluto's been in the sign of Capricorn all the way since 2008, and he's almost done. Okay, Pluto, he's another main key player for this transit because he is one of Scorpio's rulers. Okay, so Pluto, we talked about this, Pluto's like the destroyer. Okay, that's what Pluto does. He creates this death and rebirth process, complete degeneration, but then a more powerful regeneration, okay, or decomposition, and then things growing back more powerfully. And this sign of Capricorn rules the structure of our civilization. Capricorn rules traditions. Capricorn rules things like government, rules the structure of our cities, our streets, all sorts of things like that. So Pluto is working very, very powerfully. Really between now and kind of even really going into February of 2025, Pluto is going to be very intense. When something's at the very end of a zodiac sign and going into the very beginning of another zodiac sign, it's very, very powerful. And that's basically what Pluto's doing. And he's squaring the nodes. That's a long-term square going on between Pluto and these nodes. And I think that's really going to kind of go on for at least the next 3 or 4 months. But what I like about this is that here's the North Node going through the sign of Aries. Okay. Now, I don't mean to bore anybody because I talk so much about these nodes, but they're so important to understand. The North Node right here is where energy comes in. It's like the pump that pumps celestial energy into Earth. The South Node is like the drain point. The South Node is where celestial energy goes out. So here we've got Pluto, which influences the transformational process, the degeneration, is actually forcing a square could create a force. Okay, that here's the North Node going through Aries. Very strong energy. Okay, let's talk about Aries for a minute. Aries is ruled by Mars. As we just mentioned, Mars is often referred to as the planet of war. Aries is a very aggressive energy. And please do not get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that every Aries out there is aggressive. They certainly can be. They can be competitive, okay? Because that sign of Aries, it's the warrior. It's the cardinal fire sign. It's, the sign of self. It's a very fiery and aggressive energy. And with the pump, the North Node coming through the sign of Aries, it's like, raw, we're all receiving this. It's very clear to see what's going on in the world and apply it to this North Node going through the sign of Aries. Meanwhile, we've got the South Node going through the sign of Libra. So again, the South Node is like the drain point. The sign of Libra is the sign of harmony and balance and fairness and relationships and justice, okay? So we've got the drain point going through the sign of justice. That's going on. These nodes are going to be in these zodiac signs all the way till January of 2025. But on like a more of a personal level, I mean, again, watching what's going on in the world, wars, all kinds of stuff going on, it just makes a lot of sense. If in your natal chart, if you've got anything near 24 degrees Aries or 24 degrees Libra, there's energy that's coming in and being flushed out of your life in a very, very powerful way, because these nodes are squaring Pluto. Pluto's forcing the transformational process, which is, generally speaking, not always so smooth. Okay, so there's that. Let's see here. Let's talk about Jupiter going through Taurus. So Jupiter, the great benefic, the great expander. Okay, Jupiter is a very optimistic energy. I do like Jupiter going through the sign of Taurus, as Taurus, again, Taurus is basically like the earth of the earth signs. And so Jupiter can be, if you've got something in your natal chart near 9 degrees Taurus, you very well, something in your life might just be kind of expanding or becoming a bigger deal. Maybe you've got some luck coming in. Jupiter influences luck. Okay, but this also can, I want to mention this, the sign of Taurus. First of all, the sign of Taurus is, well, let's start here. The sign of Taurus is very strongly associated with food. Okay, the sign of Taurus actually rules the mouth. Okay, the area of the mouth, the area of the body where things go in, the food goes in. And Jupiter actually rules things like fat. Jupiter is the great expander. And so this is something to be mindful of if you're somebody, and not only that, but Jupiter is in retrograde, I believe, all the way till December. I can't remember what day it goes stationary, but Jupiter, when anything's in retrograde, it just kind of acts a little wacky. Okay. And for some people who, don't eat so healthy, if you've got something in your chart near 9 degrees Taurus and you're somebody who doesn't eat very healthy, or you've been eating junk food or that sort of thing, this kind of can expand that area of your life or even expand your size. Okay, so just be mindful of that. But also what's going on, this sign of Taurus is also very strongly associated with money, material possessions, and values. Next year, we're going to have Jupiter and Uranus conjunct, meet together in the sign that has to do with money. I do think that there's going to be some very, very big changes going on with financial systems. And again, especially if you've got something in your chart that's either near 9 degrees Taurus or even near 21 degrees Taurus, you're getting hit with that stuff. Some of it can be wonderful, filled with luck and abundance and wisdom and philosophy, even with Jupiter right there. But some of it also might feel a little harsh for some people. Okay, so let's see here. Let's head on over to Chiron, the wounded healer. Okay, so Chiron is, let's see, I think we've got another 2.5 years of Chiron going through Aries. So Chiron is the wounded healer. Okay, Chiron will, in our natal chart, will have a lot to do with, or it'll kind of trigger things like wounds from early childhood development. And what we're meant to do as we go through our life, we're going to be offered through transits and progressions and zodiacal releasing and annual perfections, all sorts of things that will trigger things in our chart. The Chiron will kind of bring up these buried wounds, these early wounds. And what I mean is from early childhood that some people are completely unaware of. You know, it's not in their conscious awareness, but then we experience a Chiron transit. Chiron triggers that, is trying to get us to heal from those things so that in turn we can become healers ourselves. And Chiron going through the sign of Aries, Aries is the sign of self. Okay, so this is a really great opportunity for us to really work on healing ourselves. Do you have anything in your natal chart near 16 degrees Aries? If so, Chiron's sitting on it, probably trying to trigger some kind of healing experience for you. Okay, so overall, I mean, the chart looks lovely, but it's also, again, just very intense energy. Okay, so there's that. Now what I'll do is go ahead and talk about some body parts here. So the sign of Scorpio does rule the genitalia. Okay, and these parts of our body do become more sensitive when the moon transits through the sign of Scorpio, especially when it's a new or a full moon in the sign of Scorpio. So, of course, it's a good idea to pay a little extra attention to these parts of our body. Now, I'm going to say this. First of all, I'm not a doctor. I'm not offering any kind of medical advice or anything like that, but I have learned quite a bit about how to take care of our bodies, okay, over the years through studying nutrition and detoxification and medical astrology and so on and so forth. And I would not really feeling comfortable with, mentioning particular herbs to help support the genitalia because it's going to be so incredibly unique for each and every one of us. You know, I wouldn't want to overexert somebody, but what I was going to mention is that I do have this really wonderful book. It's called Earthwise Herbal Repertory by Matthew Wood. Fantastic. I mean, there's probably 50, 60, maybe even 70, maybe even 100 different types of herbs for all different parts of our body. Excellent book. Okay. And that's an excellent book for really anybody. It's very simple to understand. It's very simple to be able to understand how to work with the herbs if you really read through that book. But what I was going to recommend is something called Damiana. Damiana can be, especially with this trine going to Neptune between the sun and the moon, Damiana can be sort of an aphrodisiac. It can be an aphrodisiac, but it doesn't have to be an aphrodisiac. This is also just something that can kind of calm things down, kind of loosen up the intensity. Not only that, I mean, the first time I ever had Damiana was through one of my very favorite stores. If you're ever in Santa Cruz, California, I highly recommend checking out Go Ask Alice. It's an herb shop, but they've got all kinds of other neat things going on, all kinds of like hippie clothes and tapestries and all kinds of neat stuff. But they would offer a cup of Damiana tea to any customers who came in. And I could see why, because it does kind of like loosen you up. You're like, oh, okay, that stuff's lovely. It just makes you feel a little nicer. Okay. And it's a little dreamy. I personally really like Damiana. So there's that. Again, not a doctor, not trying to offer any kind of medical advice, but some of the things I was going to mention here is that this sign of Scorpio, well, it not only rules the genitalia, it rules really the entire excretory system. And the colon, I mean, everything of every part of the body where things go out, the colon, the sweat glands, the nose, any part where things go out. And this sign of Scorpio, because it's so intense, there can be this tendency for things like toxicity or parasites to be active when the moon transits through the sign of Scorpio. And moreover, what can also happen is like basically the sign of Scorpio, the energy of it can, if you have say a blocked up colon, if you've been constipated or something like that, this sign of Scorpio can release the toxins from your colon into the bloodstream. okay, which is not good for anybody. I mean, I think it probably happens to most people out there and just completely unaware of it. But with that said, it's a really good idea to keep our blood clean, keep the colon clean, clearly, so that that doesn't happen in the first place. For that, personally, I really like something called oxy-powder from Global Healing. I also really like, I think it's called Paratrex from Global Healing. Those are like my favorite for really fleshing things out. But again, you might want to be really careful if you're going to take like something like a laxative when the moon's transiting through the sign of Scorpio. It might be too much for you, so you might want to be a little bit careful with that. But we also don't want it to be blocked up so that, you know, the toxins are going into our bloodstream. So it is a good idea for taking care of the blood. Just something really simple that I love is beets. It's preferably red beets. They're best. You're going to get the best like benefits from raw beets. I usually just like to use like a cheese grater and shred them up and put it on top of my salad. I also personally really like steamed beets. I like to put a little bit of apple cider vinegar and sea salt on them. I understand not everybody likes these flavors. Not everybody likes beets. I think these days you can even get, I know you can get beet powder, which is really yummy in a smoothie, like a fruit smoothie. But I'm pretty sure you can even get the beet powder in capsules. Beet powder is so good for just so many different things. It's very detoxifying. Not only that, but this sign of Scorpio can also be very strongly associated with things like candida. So taking olive leaf extract to take care of parasites, that sort of thing. This is a really good time to overall just be paying attention to these parts of our body and taking care of these parts of our body. Okay, so there's that. I think I covered all of that. Now, gemstones. So the dedicated zodiacal birthstone for the sign of Scorpio is actually topaz. I have a topaz ring somewhere, but I just don't know where I put it. I tried to find it before. I have no idea where I put that ring. Anywho, certainly not everybody has topaz. Not only that, but topaz is a very, very powerful stone and could be excellent for some people, but certainly not for everybody. Okay, so as usual, what I leave a full extensive list of stones that resonate well with the sign the moon is transiting through in the description below, but I also like to name some that just kind of stand out to me because they're not only supportive for the sign of Scorpio, but just the other astrological forces that we're receiving. So this right here, I believe you pronounce it tourmalinated quartz. Okay. And what I love about this is it's got the protective tourmaline in there, but it's also clear crystal quartz. The reason I like the blend of that is because clear crystal quartz is very amplifying. Okay, so if you're going through a super intense emotional time, you might not want to sit with just clear crystal quartz. Something that's a little bit more protective, you know, or the blend of both. You know, this right here is just black tourmaline, which is a very, very protective stone. Also resonates well with the sign of Scorpio. But the tourmalinated quartz happens to resonate extremely well with the sign of Scorpio. Another one that's a little more like uplifting is labradorite. Labradorite is a beautiful stone. I mean, I don't know if the camera is going to be able to pick up the lighting. And if you've never seen labradorite in person, especially like a really good piece of it, it's such a beautiful stone. It could be great for communication, and it's just a little more uplifting. In fact, really, I was going to say like any rose quartz, specifically smoky rose quartz resonates very well with the sign of Scorpio, but something even, oh boy, aquamarine also resonates well with the sign of Scorpio. And those stones are just a little more kind of uplifting. Okay. So it just kind of depends on what you're going through. Another thing is I put my, carnelian pendant on. Carnelian resonates extremely well with the sign of Scorpio. And part of the reason for that is because carnelian can be really, really good for healing sexual trauma or really any sort of like sexual energy. Carnelian can be a wonderful stone for that. But I do happen to know that there's a lot of people out there with some very serious sexual trauma. I really like carnelian for working through that type of thing. Okay. And I mean, you can also just get carnelian just in a stone. This is carnelian here. Beautiful stone. But again, it's like, what do you want to work with? And again, if you're somebody who just has a few crystals laying around and you don't have like a collection or whatever, that's perfectly okay. But I will say that it's in my opinion, wise to use something that's of a darker nature, like this right here, shungite. Shungite also resonates well with the sign of Scorpio, to keep yourself protected from the unwanted energies. They all work very differently. A really good book is The Encyclopedia of Crystals by Judy Hall. It goes into the structure of crystals, how they're made, where they're made, the metaphysical benefits of each crystal, and what's maybe not the best crystal for this person and maybe better for that person, that sort of thing. But overall, I do recommend having something that's a little like darker, a little more protective, and then something that's a little more clear, even something that's like citrine, or even something like amethyst. If you've just got a few stones to work with here, personally, I think it's wise to have one that will protect and one that will amplify, and then maybe one other one to kind of make things a little more exciting. Okay, so there's that. I think I covered everything. We went through the parts of the body. We went through the sign of Scorpio. We went through the chart, and I will cover gemstones. So I think I will leave that there. If you'd like to schedule an astrology reading, you can visit erinwageastrology.com. You can schedule straight through my website. I do hope to hear from some of you. And until next time, namaste to all of you.